Welcome everybody to FraxCheck, your weekly Frax vibe check. I am Capital K, and I'm here with my co-host DeFi Dave and our producer extraordinaire Sam, plus a special guest that's on his lap. And this is her first FraxCheck, so I'm gonna take it slow for y'all. But right off the bat, we got to start with our flagship product, and that is the Frax stablecoin. And you see here, our
Wait, what's the name for this
has...
week?
Oh,
Yeah, what's
right.
the name for this week?
I forgot. The baby kind of threw me off my vibe here. I'm distracted. But the vibe from this week is reservedly good news. I don't want to jinx anything.
Reservedly good news.
I'll take it.
Good news.
I don't want to jinx, and I don't want to. No. Tone it down. No exclamation mark here. It's more like an ellipsis situation. It's like, let's not jinx anything.
Content news. Content news.
Yes, content news. Content news, everybody. I call this week content news. And first, our supply did not go down. It just stayed flat for the last like 4 Frax checks. So I take that as good news. On the next slide, you see that we are regaining the peg a little bit as our range went from 0.998 to 1.002. So very happy there. And now our curve swap is actually at 0.9989. So again, we're getting back to,
it's tight.
No more 7.
It's tight.
Exactly. It's getting tight. So I don't want to jinx anything, but I was very happy as I was putting this together because on the next slide, you see here that our collateralization percent is actually up to 93.3%, which is almost a 80 bips increase over last week. So good.
Damn.
And on the decentralization percent front, we are down 2.2%, but that's not to drown out the good news of A, the supply is still flat, and B, the peg is strong, and C, our collateralization percent is increasing. So things are fairly good above the board. I think 93.3% is our highest collateralization percent ever. Or at least since the year. So that's the good news there. And then obviously we have to go and check our second product, which is the Frax based pool. And you see here that we hit a nice round number of 500 million in TPL, y'all. And that is obviously we've hit way higher than that before, but this is our first time reclaiming the 500th mark. As you can see, our March, ever since kind of like the USDC debacle. And then on the volume front, we are getting back to that low. We're only generating about 19.5% so far for the 10 days in April. And that is definitely below what we've generated previously. So I think it's going to be a slow month for Curve and / the stablecoin world across the board here. And then now, one good news though is on the next slide, you'll see that we are holding strong above 100% at 114. Holding strong there. Do you guys see the graph? Dave,
I see a line. I just see a line. I see the 114%, but
yeah. I don't see the graph.
I see it. Let me stop and reshare. We're gonna stop and reshare for everyone, just so it doesn't get messed up, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's the audience window. Actually, keep going, kid. I'll work on this.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, this is literally the 6th week that we've held above 110%. So we got as high as 118. And then we went, 117, 118, 113, 113, 114. And I don't want to say this is a new regime. Like I said, this is content news. This is not good news. We're content. So, happily doing that there. But on the next slide, you'll see a kind of lineup of all the different pools. And you should see, there it is. You should see that the Frax BP at 500, as I mentioned. Then the 3 pool at 437, which was no change. And then the Frax 3 CRV pool at 384, which again was no change. So the Frax BP pool is actually garnering additional liquidity very intentionally, right? People are intentionally LPing into Frax BP rather than just throwing it into Curve, period. So that's great news there, in my opinion. And now, moving on to our next stablecoin, we call this the FrxETH. And as always, the count is up only. We are up 2.4% from last week. And so far, we are at 131,376 Ethereum tokens being wrapped into FrxETH. Pretty solid numbers. And my only gripe here is, I mean, I can't believe this is a gripe, but we're only growing at 2% week over week for the last 2 weeks. I definitely want to see that number back into the fives because that's what we were having for a while. And yeah, I just want to see more. I think people are slowing down just because Shanghai is literally right there. So they might want to do a wait and see. But hopefully everything will, Shanghai will be a catalyst for us. But let's see where these FrxETH is hanging out. We got to take a look at FrxETH, which holds about 63% of all of the FrxETH in existence. And then the remaining 29% is hanging out as Curve LPs. And then 8% is chilling in the ether. So this, I feel like we've been languishing or rather lounging around these composition, like about 2/3 in FrxETH, a third in Curve LP, and then the rest kind of hanging in the ether. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate composition, but we will see very shortly after Shanghai comes live and that we're able to withdraw, see how this numbers change. But just paying attention to that. And now, obviously, FrxETH is a stable coin, so we got to look at the peg. And here, like I said, content news. This is very content news. I'm very content with this news right here, okay? Our FrxETH to ETH exchange rate is 0.9999. As perfect as it can get, but let's not get ahead of our skis. And then we got to take it to the market and really see if that's true. So we went to Curve and swapped 3,500 FrxETH for ETH and received an exchange rate of 0.9983. Again, I like to see an 8 in this. I don't like to see a 7. So this is right in line with what I could accept if I were to do this trade. And then, so peg check, strong for FrxETH. Now, let's see what we're doing in the market share front. And I don't want to be too excited, but we're holding on to our fourth place. We're at 1.64%. We are still the fastest growing 30-day change in the LSD landscape. Just to give everybody an idea for the listeners, here we have Lido up front at 74%, and they grew by 3% over the last 30 days. Then Coinbase, wrapped ETH grew by about 5%, Rocket Pool grew by 7%, and FrxETH grew by 15%. So we are definitely growing the fastest, and we're eating up our market share week after week. I've only seen it go up; it has yet to go down. So I'm excited for that. And then, but in one department that FrxETH needs no introduction and need no time to wait is the yield department, and we are hanging on to the crown for ever since I started covering this yield comparison at 5.6% above Lido by almost 1 full percent. So we are still the best game in town to come after. And our TVL is great too, right? Let's compare our TVL to say like, Rocket Pool. We're like about, call it a 3.5 size smaller than Rocket Pool, but we're definitely outperforming them a ton on the yield front. So very, very excited for that. Now, moving on, we have our next product, which is the FPI, and great news on the FPI front here. We have, obviously, the supply is at 82.3, so nothing changed there. But what I want to highlight is the treasury grew by another 200K. So it went from 88.4 million treasury TVL to 88.4 million treasury TVL. Massive. And with that, that translated to an increase of about 300K or so on the equity portion. And what is the equity? Well, like I said, the treasury is in charge of creating yield so that the FPI remains pegged at the inflation rate. And any excess yield would flow into what we call equity. And that here is at 5 million. So all the VEFPIS holders effectively have claims to this bit. So there's 5 million in equity built up in the FPI product. Now, moving to the next slide, you'll see that we'll talk about our FraxLend product. Here we hit our TVL. We're almost climbing back to where we were before the USD fiasco at 170
Content
million.
news. Content news.
Yes, content news. So we're climbing back there. And in terms of supply value, like I said, like we're getting back to that 70 million number that we want before the USDC thing. So we've been languishing for a good couple weeks, but now we're okay. And then on the utilization, we saw that nice bump of 3% as well too. So people are coming back to the market, and I kind of like it. So next slide, you'll see that we talk about the Frax lend pairs. And here I kind of rank them by supply APY and borrow APY. For the folks listening, at the very top of the list, and I have to ignore the V2 FrxETH Frax because that's locked, but we have Curve and Frax pair paying 9%. And it's been pretty consistent between 7 and 9 through and through. So if you just wanted to park your Frax and don't even think about it, I feel this is a great contender. Now, if you are, on the other hand, hold as FrxETH, I want to highlight here that the cost to borrow right now is ridiculous. It only costs you 2% to borrow if you were to use FrxETH as the collateral. And there's about 5 million of available TVL in the FrxETH pair. So I would say here is the cheapest place to borrow while earning the native 6% yield on your ETH. So you're really getting paid to borrow here. Just saying, just pointing it out. Okay. And then on the last leg of the DeFi Trinity, we have the Frax swap. And here we hit 71 million in TVL. So again, kind of back to where we were prior to the USDC thing. But if you notice, on the FrxETH, on the Frax swap volume, we're only at 30 million so far in the first 10 days. And you could visually see that it is much, much lower than what we saw in the first quarter of the year. Like it's very evident here that stablecoins, or rather Frax itself, or in FraxSwap, is not getting the volume it is going to. So expect a slow month is what I'm saying. But let's take a look at some of the great top pairs in FraxSwap. On the next slide, we see that again on the top is FXS Frax. It is the de facto place for on-chain liquidity for this specific pair. So, and last week we had 19 million in trading volume. This week we had 16 million. So it's pretty much hanging out there. That's where FraxSwap is happening. And Sin is actually getting quite some volume. Last week, I think it was like 5th on the list, but this week it's now at 1.4 million. So that is the Sin and Frax pair. Also not bad. Now, moving on, we have our profitability. And we always start with the AMOs. So here we saw a continuous, we're not down, we're up literally 1 bip or 10 bips, and we made $1 million over the last week. And that $1 million came from, yes, very nice. That $1 million came from the liquidity AMO, which went from 77.8 to 78.8. So everything is holding on steady. We didn't give up anything.
Diversity.
And we gained well. So let me run it down for the listeners. For Curve AMO, we have 625 million. For the liquidity AMO, we have 78 million. For lending, we have 85, and then investor AMO at 135, totaling to 923 million in our AMOs. Now, let's take a look at the profitability of the Convex AMO. We see here that we've made 670,000 in month of April, and we spent 830,000 in expenses, aka bribes, and that gives us a net loss of 160K, which is not bad, right? We kind of expected this, and we have another couple more days to go before the next Vodium deadline. So we're gonna get to earn some more yield for the week. So that number should be close to flat, is my point. Now, on the next slide, we'll see the FraxLend AMO and see how much money we make there. So far in the month of, let me walk you through how the FraxLend AMO composition currently is. So we have minted 65 million Frax, but only 40 million has been lent out. All right. And we are allowed a Frax allocation cap at 116 million based on governance. So, we're well under our cap in terms of Frax to be lent. So we are ready and positioned for a lot of growth into the FraxLend AMO once new pairs come live. But how well are we putting this money to use? Well, we actually did pretty freaking well so far for the month of April. We make about like 14K a week. So for the last 2 weeks, we made 28K. And if we were to continue this, I expect us to pull in at least 50K a month from just FraxLend AMO itself. And this is just the beginning, right? So let's extrapolate that. Like that's like 600K a year.
That's nice,
right? Like that's pretty solid for a very first product that we just launched, a couple months ago. So I'm liking what I see. And on the next slide, I just want to say good job, everybody, on being safe, because we have 0 liquidations in the last 30 days. So for the month of April, we are still clean. Everybody's staying safe out there. Everybody's using protection. I like it. And then on the next slide, we're going to take a look at FPI monthly revenue, and it is at 25K for the month so far. Not to mention, there is $55,000 worth of unclaimed rewards that is still needs to be, claimed. And we're looking very, very strong for the month of April so far on the FPI front. So I expect that equity number that I spoke about earlier to increase. Now, let's take a look at the summary of all of our revenues for the month so far. We have, like I said, 160K loss for the convex, but we're going to earn a couple more yield for a couple more days, so that should come up. FraxLend, like I said, that number is only going to keep going up. We expect to be at about 50K by the end of the month. And then for FPI, like I said, this number is going to take us into the green. So my projection for this month is we could be down small because there's 2 more there's 2 more bribes that's going to fall into April. So we might be down small for the month, but FraxLend AMO and FPI is adding to the revenue for everybody here. So that is it for this week's FraxCheck, boys.
Nice. It's cool to see the diversity of income sources. I like this new addition.
Yes, sir. I do need to separate out FPI because it's technically not FxS's revenue because that accrues to FPI.
Oh, true. Yeah. FPI.
Well,
yeah.
It gets like 30% of the revenue, right?
Yeah. So I could apply a discount, but I'd rather just
25%.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather just put everything together. So, it's like, this is how much the whole thing makes, and how we divvy up the pie is how we divvy up the pie. But this is what it looks like right now.
You know where I bet we would be positive if we had it in here is we're not reporting on the FrxETH revenue.
Oh yeah.
Not yet. I'm trying to pull that number, but I can't find it. Yeah, if any listeners know where to pull the FrxETH revenue, holla at your boy.
And if you want to holla at us at any time, just come over to our Telegram group at Flywheel DeFi. Follow us on Twitter at Flywheel DeFi. Keep up with us on YouTube. Hit that bell button for all the latest alpha, Frax, DeFi, and everything in between. Subscribe, leave us a comment, give us a like. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at @0xcapital_K.
And I'm at traders_insane.
And we'll see you next week. Peace.